The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then, of course, the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary Sangiovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Border, Aaron Sweet, El Mahari, and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method,
Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On,
It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Maybury,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbansic of Eight Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back, true believers, once again to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, I am not going to say Excelsior today.
I'll say it. And I will channel the great thespian Chet Williamson when I do it. When I say, Excelsior, true believers.
That didn't sound anything like Chet Williamson.
It sounded like Chet acting as me. Acting as him.
Yeah, it says it's Chet imitating you, imitating him. That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's sort of like when I hear Tim Levin imitating you doing a British accent.
Have you ever heard Tim's American accent?
Yeah, but your British accent is worse than Tim's American accent.
I find it amusing that Tim thinks all Americans talk like Hank Hill from King of the Hill.
Yes, he does, yeah. Every American sounds like they come from deep in the heart of Texas, according to Tim. All right, well, listen, nobody who's listening to this show knows who Tim is, but they should actually. They should go read The Silence so they're prepared for the movie.
That's right, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask how the GoFundMe for Twisted Book of Shadows is doing.
We are. Hang on, I will check live, Brian, because we are incredibly close to reaching 2/3 of our funding. Let's see if we've made it yet. We are $130 away from getting to the 2/3 mark. Almost at $4,000. So we need another 2,000. So folks,
where can folks do that?
Yeah, Twisted Book of Shadows. They can go to the Twisted Book of Shadows Facebook page, or they could search it on GoFundMe, or follow me on Facebook. I post about it all the time. But let's not bore people with that too much today.
Let's not bore people.
But yes, folks, we appreciate every dollar we get for that cause. Anyway, look, we're covering 4 issues today, folks.
That's right. Defenders 42 through 45.
Yeah, and the best part of this from me, Brian, was, well, it's not even the best. It's a double-edged sword here, switching over to floppy comics, digging into my long box and pulling out the actual physical issues. The bad part is that I get the much less vibrant colors available on newsprint comics in the 1970s.
Well, at least you're getting color. I am rereading these in Marvel's Essential Defenders Volume 3, which are the black and white reprints.
There you go.
And while it's fantastic to look at Sal Buscema and Keith Giffen's art in its original not original black and white form, but in that black and white form, the Essentials, they're known for the binding. The pages sort of bleed into the binding of the book.
Yeah.
So
you have to like split it open in order to read it. The other thing you're missing by doing that, and that we were missing by doing the Masterworks, is the 1970s advertising, which I am going to bring up several times, probably over the course of this episode and potentially in future episodes. But before that, let's jump into a couple of things. Multiple changes beginning with this issue.
Absolutely. As we talked about in last week's episode, it was the end of an era. Sal Buscema left the book. He had been drawing the Defenders since the beginning. And Steve Gerber, who took this sometimes disjointed series and solidified it and made these characters a family. And imbued it with, no matter how bizarre it got, no matter how many elves with guns and Lubberdites, it still felt realistic. There was a sense of realism about it and pathos. They're both gone now.
And honestly, all due respect to Jerry Conway. Jerry Conway comes on this issue as writer and editor. In the subsequent issues, this is the one issue he writes. Conway was a stalwart of Marvel in the 1970s. He wrote every damn comic book in existence in the 1970s
Exactly.
for Marvel. Spider-Man, he was the co-creator of The Punisher. He wrote all kinds of things. All due respect to Jerry, he does not write this issue well, even though he's also the editor. And he continues to be the editor going forward for a few issues anyway. And, he does pick up all the threads that Gerber laid down. He continues the familial aspect of using these characters. But it's just kind of flat.
I agree. You remember, this issue, the story had originally been conceived by Steve Gerber. And I imagine Trish Starr would have played heavily into it for reasons we'll find out here in a little while. But, Gerber left the book because he was missing deadlines with all of his Marvel titles, something which he wrote about in Howard the Duck. But Conway comes in. The guy makes a valiant effort to pick up the pieces that Gerber left him and tell a story, but it feels very disjointed. The dialogue is heavily stilted, especially coming off Gerber's dialogue.
Exactly.
And you almost get a sense that while Conway knows these characters, he knows the Hulk, he knows Doctor Strange, he knows Luke Cage, you almost get a sense that he hasn't been reading the back issues of the Defenders.
Yeah, I felt that too. It's interesting. I'm glad you put it that way because it does feel like he knows the individual characters, but has no sense of the context of them being together.
Right. What does work for me with these issues is, of course, Keith Giffen's art. Now, Full disclaimer, Keith is one of my dearest friends in this business. He's somebody I looked up to for years, and I'm lucky enough to have a genuine friendship with him. This is some of his earliest Marvel work, and the Jack Kirby influence on him is very clear in these pages.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, I don't know Keith. I've never met Keith. So I have no vested interest in lauding him here. I will say that I certainly miss in these pages. What I miss, Brian, is Buscema's Hulk. Giffen's Hulk is great, but I loved Buscema's Hulk so much that I miss it here. Other than that, I think these pages are great. I agree.
Buscema's Hulk, that's who I think of when I think of Hulk, and I always will.
Yeah.
That's why I had such a hard time in the 90s, I guess, when Todd McFarlane was drawing Hulk and everybody was raving about it. I wasn't feeling it because I like Buscema's more realistic rendering of Hulk. But I do love Keith's art in these books. And what I find interesting, Sal Buscema, one of my favorite artists of all time, but not so much in issue 42, but in 43, 44, 45, you start to see Keith playing with panels and how the book is laid out. And he really does some interesting things that we'll touch on today. But let's get to issue 42.
Yeah.
It opens. Now, one thing we should tell listeners, and I actually forgot about this until I was rereading them. Issue 41 ended with Red Guardian, Luke Cage, Valkyrie, Doc Strange, Nighthawk, and the Hulk and Clea all out in Nevada rescuing Trish Starr. And then we lead into issue 42. In between those two issues, there was a two-part storyline in the Hulk's comic book where the Hulk went on a rampage, and it was his friends, the Defenders, that came in to calm him down and sort things out. So this issue actually picks up after that crossover with Hulk. And we're in Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, where Nighthawk has suddenly burst into flame. And Doc Strange and Valkyrie and Hulk and Luke Cage are staring in surprise. Red Guardian, curiously enough, is nowhere to be seen.
Well, and let me jump in on that one. I thought that was really interesting because unless there is something in that Hulk issue that you're referring to that covers this, I definitely have the feeling that our friend Mr. Conway had forgotten all about Red Guardian. I'm not being funny. I'm not trying to make a joke. I think that he literally forgot Red Guardian was in this comic book.
I believe you are right. There's nothing in those two issues of Hulk that account for her disappearance.
Right, and there's nothing in here that indicates anything about where she is. Nobody seems to notice that she's not there. I seriously think that, and it's funny, we'll have to ask Giffen when we get him on here if he knows anything about this, because I think that that Conway just didn't know Red Guardian was a member of the Defenders.
So anyway, Nighthawk is, and here's another thing about Conway's writing. We talked about Gerber's realism, and I want to stress, we're not bashing on Jerry Conway.
No, not at all. Look, again, Conway was a consummate pro. He wrote a lot of great comics. I suspect he was thrown into the deep end on this thing when Gerber quit, and it shows.
Yeah, I mean, at that point in Marvel's history, you had you had the Marvel bullpen, but there were two very distinct types of writers in that bullpen. You had guys like Jack Kirby, Jerry Conway, Roy Thomas, who were still writing comics the Stan Lee way, or in Jack's case, he was writing them the Jack Kirby way.
Right.
And, the same month, you could pick up Gerber's Defenders, and the dialogue and the plots were now, and they were the words of somebody hip, and then you'd read Kirby's Captain America, and the dialogue sounded like your grandpa, and that's what's going on here. While Nighthawk is burning, Valkyrie goes on this long soliloquy about who she is and what's happening, and Nighthawk cuts to the chase. He says, "For heaven's sake, help me!"
Yeah. Yeah, so Nighthawk is burning. All right, so speaking of Nighthawk cutting to the chase, we'll cut to the chase.
Yes.
So Nighthawk is burned by some sort of visible but not ordinary fire. It turns out to be generated by Solar with two R's. And I feel like it's Pirate Day. Solar. Master of the Solar Flame.
He's a villain that has fought Captain America and the Avengers. They find this out by, while everyone else is standing around talking, Hulk decides, well, somebody is hurting his friend. Hulk's going to find out who. So he just smashes down the wall, goes outside. Luke Cage and Doc Strange and Valkyrie follow him. There's Solar, looming above them. And he tells them that he is there to look for something called the Star of Capistan.
There you go. And we don't need to know much more than that about this until we get to the result of that, right?
Exactly. But we should mention that Solar is not alone. One of Hulk's old rogues gallery shows up, the Rhino.
My favorite, I will say that although I'm not a big fan of Jerry Conway's dialogue in this issue, I do love the fact that when the Rhino knocks him over, Hulk's dialogue is, Rhino knocked Hulk into hydrant. Now Hulk is wet, and Hulk is angry.
I love the Rhino. I always have.
It just reminds me so much of my wife, because she doesn't like getting rained on.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to say from now on. I'm going to show her that panel.
So yeah, a big fight ensues. What's great is Luke Cage gets to take on the Rhino. I don't think that's happened again in Marvel history up to today. And any current Marvel writers listening, I know there are some of you. Whoever gets Luke Cage next, you need to make that happen. But yeah, they make short work of Rhino and Solar, and what we find out is that Rhino and Solar are there at the bequest of a mysterious third villain. They are calling themselves the Emissaries of Evil, and this third villain, promised them that the Defenders would indeed have this mysterious Star of Capistan. Well, the Defenders have no fucking clue what this thing is.
Right.
And so Rhino and Solar escape.
Well, they return to wherever they are by some sort of teleportation.
I can tell you where they are. They are on a spacecraft.
I thought that was it. And so this is the other thing about this issue. Folks, the big bad behind Rhino and Solar is actually our old pal Egghead.
That's right. Last seen in Giant-Sized Defenders, issue number 4. He's the bumbling supervillain, foe of Yellow Jacket, former Defender Yellow Jacket, and notable, unfortunately, for he's the reason that Trish Starr lost her arm. You'll remember the bomb that went off in Nighthawk's limo.
And in this new iteration of Egghead, his face and head are the same, but Brian, he's wearing a uniform that reminds me very much of Kang, the Conqueror, or something like that. Somehow, Egghead is now much more formidable, presumably, and has a spaceship with teleportation, and he's got Solar and Rhino as his henchmen.
Right, and we find out he's freed them from prison, and he's looking for this Star of Capistan, which was a jewel that was held sacred by a secret Pakistani religious cult, and was then held by the leader of that cult, who is Omar Karindu, perhaps Doctor Strange's oldest friend. Anybody who read Doctor Strange, of course, knows Omar. This is his first appearance, however, in the Defenders.
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment before we continue with the plot for this commercial break, Brian.
Okay.
Because I want to point out an ad that's in this issue. It's illustrated with a football player. And the ad says, "Hang loose, it's the juice." Hey kids, this is O.J. Simpson coming at you with Juice Mobiles, multi-purpose shoes by Spot Built. Clearly this is prior to O.J. Simpson becoming a double murderer.
God, I remember that ad.
Uh-huh. Anyway, so yeah, and the other thing that I was always interested in these days is, even though I never ordered comics through the mail, I always like to look at what was being published at the time. So a quick side note: the list of things you could write in to subscribe to through the mail: Amazing Spider-Man, Avengers, Captain America, Captain Marvel, Conan, Daredevil, The Defenders, Doctor Strange, Fantastic Four, Howard the Duck, Incredible Hulk, The Invaders, Iron Man, Marvel Tales, Marvel Team Up, Marvel 2-in-1, Master of Kung Fu, Power Man, Thor, and Tomb of Dracula.
Wow.
I think Marvel needs to return to a level of simplicity and rebuild. But in any case,
you
continue.
Mean there weren't 4 different Spider-Man titles and 20 different X-Men titles and 3 different Avengers titles?
Nope. In fact, if you'll note, X-Men was not something you could subscribe to.
That's right.
So at that time, anyway, because they had no confidence it would continue. The Star of Capistan we're back to it. And Omar Karindu comes to see Doctor Strange.
Well, wait, before we get to that, though, we have to touch. We leave Egghead on his space station, and we go to this New York City medical center, where what has to be the most haphazardly written panel ever in comics.
Okay.
This doctor is examining Nighthawk, and Luke Cage and Valkyrie and Doc Strange are there with him. Hulk has been left outside on a park bench.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get where you're going. Go ahead.
And Doc Strange, you can tell by the dialogue balloons that they added this in after Keith had finished the art. Somebody tapped Jerry Conway on the shoulder, I'm sure of it, and said, "Hey, you forgot about Red Guardian." And Doctor Strange says, "I would feel more at ease if the Red Guardian were here to attend Kyle, but she's mysteriously disappeared."
Yeah, that was great. That was great. And we'll get to more of that in the next issue. So,
yes.
In any case, in a sort of relatively confusing way, Doctor Strange goes off to see Omar Karindu at the behest of a servant who has shown up to ask him to go see Omar. He goes to see Omar to discuss something called the Cult of the Unliving Four. And then Omar reveals the Star of Capistan, which is this ancient, multifaceted jewel that is now out of control. We don't learn much about the jewel in this point, but it's revealed.
Right. And when it is revealed, something strange happens to Doctor Strange. See what I did there?
I did see that. You could have written this issue.
I could have.
With that dialogue, yeah. We cut back to the Hulk on a park bench, the ground rumbles, and the Cobalt Man appears.
That's right. Now, the Cobalt Man, if you're unfamiliar with him, he is a longtime Marvel supervillain. He was an admirer of Tony Stark, and he tried to duplicate Tony Stark's Iron Man armor, but the radiation from the armor drove him insane. And then there was a second Cobalt Man at one point. But, yeah, he's fought the Hulk. He's fought the X-Men. He's fought Iron Man, of course. And Hulk, in fact, recognizes him. Hulk is sitting there on the park bench when the Cobalt Man just erupts out of the ground. And, we get an interesting recap of the Cobalt Man's history through the Hulk's eyes.
We don't really need to go through it, though.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't. But yeah, then Cage and Valkyrie leap out of the hospital to help their friend. Nighthawk flies out shirtless, which I think is funny.
Yep.
And Hulk beats the tar out of the Cobalt Man and starts a critical reaction. As we mentioned, the Cobalt Man is made out of nuclear material, and he's about to have a nuclear meltdown. He's about to explode right there on the streets of New York City.
Yeah, so that's how that issue ends. We go into 43. I don't want to take too much. So this issue also, by the way, this issue is also written by Conway, drawn by Giffen, and we should have mentioned Klaus Janson is the inker / finisher on these. Yeah. These couple of issues. Klaus doing yeoman's work on many issues of the Defenders that we've gone over in the last couple. So we're in New York. The Cobalt Man is about to go nuclear, and they don't know what to do. Nighthawk appears with a solution.
Good idea.
Yeah, Nighthawk basically says, "Hey Hulk, you'll probably survive. Why don't you pick up the about to go nuclear Cobalt Man and jump really fucking high?"
That's right. And Hulk perhaps sums up my thoughts on this whole plot when Hulk says, Hulk will listen, but Hulk still thinks this is stupid.
Yeah. Well, and actually what Nighthawk wants Hulk to do, because water counteracts or stops nuclear reactions from taking place, or cools the nuclear reaction. So Nighthawk wants the Hulk to throw the Cobalt Man into the river, which he does, and lo and behold, it works.
It does.
Yeah.
Which enrages Egghead up there on his space station. He's ranting to the Rhino and Solar about it. He sends them down to Earth.
And then we have the best part of the issue.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell people what happens.
As Valkyrie and Luke Cage are running up, Luke says, "We followed you across town, and look who we ran into."
And Nighthawk exclaims, "The Red Guardian!"
Hey, we forgot the Red Guardian existed, but here she is. She says, "My comrades at the Soviet embassy wished to speak with me, Nighthawk, but I left them when I heard a radio report of your battle. I see you have won." So there you go. Now we're Red Guardian's back in it. Rhino and Solar are sent back down to do their ugly work. And
right, they show up at Omar's hotel and they go looking for him, but instead they find a mysterious cloaked figure
called the Red Rajah.
The Red Rajah.
The Red
who
Rajah.
seems to wield mystical force, but we can't see his face. And he makes very, very short work of both the Rhino and Solar.
And I have to say, there are many lines of dialogue in the previous issue and this issue that I would probably be tempted to mock, but out of respect for Jerry Conway, I will not.
Right.
And because I will say that I didn't write a lot of Marvel comics, but of the ones I wrote, most of them are pretty shitty. So I'm not going to mock Jerry Conway's dialogue. But yeah.
We then get to what is one of the most convoluted things I've ever seen in comics. We have Red Guardian and the Cobalt Man hooked up to this machine. And Clea, since Doctor Strange is still missing, Clea is going to do some kind of mind transference where she's going to link the Cobalt Man's mind and Red Guardian's mind, fusing them into one and helping the Cobalt Man to heal himself, to become complete. So while everyone's standing around doing that, Hulk is having none of this. As Hulk says, Hulk is worried about Magician. Magician has been gone a long time. Magician is Hulk's friend. And Hulk is so lost in his own thoughts that he doesn't notice Egghead teleport inside Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum. You know those little eggs that Silly Putty used to come in?
Well, this and again, I got to this and I looked at it and I thought, is this something he's done before? Because I don't remember seeing. Okay.
No, but yeah, it's like the little plastic eggs at Easter. You know, he throws one of those at Hulk, and it captures Hulk in a bag.
Because of course it does. And
if you think I'm making this up, folks, Bag attacks Hulk, growing all over him. Hulk can't fight Bag. Too soft. Too much.
And here, Brian, is the moment where I want to get political for a second. And once I say this, I'll never be able to take it back because you'll see it always, folks. Donald Trump talks like the Hulk.
I pointed that out on Twitter several months ago.
Did
it went
you?
viral. Yeah.
Because Trump, the way that he refers to himself in the third person and the, sort of kindergarten level of his dialogue.
Yes, several months ago, I took one of his tweets and superimposed it with a panel of Hulk's dialogue from the 70s.
There you go.
And there was no difference between the two.
Yep. You can Bag attacks Trump, growing all over him. Hulk can't fight. Oh, Trump can't fight Bag. Too soft, too much. Trump can't move. Although he would end it with a question mark for no apparent reason.
So basically, Egghead captures Hulk. He captures Valkyrie. What I want to point out, something
with another
really
egg, by the way, he captures Valkyrie with another egg.
Yeah, with another egg. But what Giffen is doing on these two pages, I think is fascinating. You've got this panel grid layout, but at the bottom of each page, you have what's going on with Red Guardian and Cobalt Man, and the top of each page is the story of Egghead capturing each of the defenders. So basically, the comic has now been split in two. You read all the top panels first. You read the bottom panels next. This is something common these days, but you didn't see a lot of this back then. Jim Starlin would do some experimentation like that. Giffen would do experimentation like that, but Steranko obviously, but you didn't see a lot of this. And I think it's really neat just to see how even then he was still relatively young in his career, but Giffen was taking comics and rethinking how we could portray things visually.
Yeah, no, it's definitely unusual for the era, and it does go on for a number of pages. Then to return to the trick eggs like Green Arrow's trick arrows that Egghead is using, we get to he manages to capture Nighthawk with an egg. And Luke Cage walks into the room and Egghead is bouncing one of these trick eggs in his hand, like all cocky. Like, my eggs will take you, Luke Cage. And he throws an egg at Luke Cage. And the plastic egg pops open and falls away from Luke Cage.
With the sound effect of twink.
Twink. And Egghead's like, no! Because I don't understand, like, is the egg like a bullet? Because what is it about a plastic egg containing some kind of trick booby trap thing that would work on the other defenders but not work on Luke Cage?
Well,
I mean, Luke Cage's skin, yes, is not penetrable, but the other defender's skin wasn't penetrated by the eggs. The eggs struck them and were activated.
I'm going to go for my no prize here. His skin is so hard. Luke Cage's skin is so hard that the egg broke when it struck his chest, and that broke the.
Oh,
the
I see. I see. The mechanism did not deploy, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh my God! Well, the no prize is winging its way to you even now, Brian. Well, in any case, Luke Cage punches Egghead really fucking hard, which makes me happy. Egghead smashes through the door into the room where the Red Guardian has just finished being connected to the Cobalt Man thanks to Clea. The Cobalt Man is pissed at Egghead, grabs him, and even though the Cobalt Man is now somehow sane, he actually sets off an explosion that apparently kills himself and Egghead.
Right.
And then we get the Red Guardian with her speech at the end. Yes, Luke Cage, because of Cobalt Man, Egghead will no longer menace the world or make men slaves. Today a brave man died for freedom, and as a communist, that is something I must consider and pray I may someday understand.
None of my communist friends ever talk like that. Nick Mamatas and I, when we're hanging out and drinking, he never says things like that.
All right, well, look.
Wait, what? Before we go on to the next issue, though, one thing, there's something of historic value that happens here that we did not mention.
Oh, what is that?
Okay, years later, Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis would have just the seminal classic run on Justice League. And there is, of course, a famous scene from Justice League where Batman knocks out Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, with one punch. But we see the origins of the one punch here in Giffen's artwork. Remember, this was done Marvel style. So Jerry Conway told him the story, Keith drew it, and then Conway did the script. Luke Cage knocks out Egghead with one punch.
You know what? I hate to argue with you, but in fact, he punches him twice.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right.
I mean,
you're right.
He might actually lift him up and hit him again, but he does punch him twice.
Two punch.
But yes, the panel you're talking about definitely is reminiscent of the classic one punch. And look, there's no question Batman could take Guy Gardner down with one punch. All right, Defenders 44. Also, I want to point out something that I find I'm also interested in now that I'm back to the floppies, which is the corner box.
Right.
The corner box, for those of you who didn't read comics in the 70s and the early 80s, upper left-hand corner, usually, would have images of the characters who starred in the book. And the Defenders and the Avengers were always interesting to see who was going to be in the corner boxes.
Because it varied.
Yes. Hulk, Valkyrie, Nighthawk, and Doctor Strange right now, but that will change soon. This issue 44, plotted by Jerry Conway, but dialogue written by the team of Roger Slifer, the late Roger Slifer, and David Anthony Kraft, art again by Giffen and Jansen.
Right.
So let me just quickly say, and then you can lead us in. First of all, the opening splash page is fantastic.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's Hulk basically on a rampage and Luke Cage failing to stop him. But what I will say about this issue is the characters are better written, but the dialogue is so overwritten. But again, like what are you going to say? It's we're spoiled by having had Gerber. But anyway.
Well, I think what you see at play here, David Anthony Kraft, he had a very good grasp of these characters, who they were. He and Gerber were friends. Gerber even had a cameo by Kraft in issue 41, you may remember. Mm-hmm. But, some parts of this, the dialogue is still a little stilted, and I wonder if that's Roger Slifer's dialogue versus David Anthony Kraft's.
Yeah, it's impossible to know, right?
Yeah.
We'll just go through. So basically, the Hulk and Luke Cage are tearing. The Hulk is going on a rampage as he always does at the Sanctum Sanctorum. Luke Cage is trying to stop him and failing. Nighthawk tries to stop him and fails, and then Valkyrie comes in and just talks to him and calms him down.
Yeah, I mean, and Hulk raises his fist to her. Get out of Hulk's way, girl. I will not until you calm down. And Hulk. He gives in rather sheepishly, and but he takes him to task. He's like, "Look, Doctor Strange is missing. Why are we not doing anything about that?"
Exactly. Yep. Then we cut away to Dr. Tanya Belinsky, aka Red Guardian, in her room at the Sanctum Sanctorum, slamming down a red phone. She's just been talking to someone in Russia. They're trying to force her to return. She has a big decision to make. So when Hulk and Valkyrie come to say that they've got to investigate Omar Karindu, Red Guardian happens to know who he is because at the time the Soviet Union was much more open-minded about anything. This isn't a cult, but anything of the psychic sciences,
right?
Paranormal sciences, I guess we should say.
And what I love about that is when Valkyrie and Hulk walk into Red Guardian's room, Hulk has always been a character that solves things with his fists. But, again, Kraft, he has a good sense of who these characters are. Hanging with the Defenders is starting to wear off on the Hulk. Hulk comes in and very calmly says, Hulk wants to make plan now.
Yeah.
He's not just running off to solve it with his fists.
Right. Well, and again, but this is Valkyrie's influence. Valkyrie said, look, if you want to help Doctor Strange, we need a plan. And
right.
Hulk's like, I do want to help Doctor Strange. Therefore, okay, I'll plan. So then Luke and Nighthawk walk in. There's a conversation that takes place. That conversation is interrupted by the return of Brian's favorite defender, Jack
Norris. But before we get to Jack, I'm sorry, I took a mouthful of Italian sub while you were talking. We've talked about Hulk's nicknames for people. Nighthawk is Bird Nose, mm-hmm. Doctor Strange is Magician, Valkyrie is Sword Girl. Right in the panel, right before Jack walks in, Hulk decides on, it would have been acceptable at the time, but these days, a rather unfortunate nickname for Luke Cage.
Yeah. Luke Cage,
which is
fuzzy
hair.
Yeah.
Fuzzy hair.
Well, and And I think it's funny because you could see them going, well, how come there's no nickname for Cage?
Right.
And apparently they settled on Fuzzy Hair. We'll see as we go forward that this moniker did not last.
No, it did not.
All right, so Jack comes in. Nighthawk's pissed because he paid him money to go away. I actually feel like this is not really in character with what Gerber was doing because they paid him to go away, but then they found out that Jack had taken that money for a very good reason. Exactly. Nighthawk is still being douchey to him. But Jack basically says, look, I've only come back to try to make one last appeal to Valkyrie. I love you no matter what the hassles you're having with your head. I want to help you through them. Valkyrie's basically saying, look, you don't love me. You love Barbara. She's no more. You're quit trying to force me into her mold.
That's right. So Jack leaves. He's depressed, desultory. He's trying very hard not to look back at Valkyrie. And when he gets out in the street, a mysterious, shadowy figure who, judging by the dialogue, is from his past, shows up to menace him. And Jack says, "What do you want from me? I told you I don't want anything more to do with you. Leave me alone." And then Jack flees into the night.
We'll come back.
It's not the elf with a gun, judging by the silhouette.
No, although that would have been great if Jack had a history with the elf with a gun. In any case, we go to the Hotel Americana, which is where Omar Karindu was staying. The Valkyrie has stayed behind with Red Guardian to sort of try to help Red Guardian sort out her decision about what she's going to do with her future. Hulk and Nighthawk and Luke Cage have gone to the hotel in perhaps the most unfortunate panel where Nighthawk is flying, Hulk is leaping with Luke Cage riding on his shoulders.
Yes.
And Luke Cage says, "How much farther, Nighthawk? Even my steel-hard skin can't take many more of these jolts." I just can't.
They arrive and they find, Rhino and Solar, defeated by Red Rajah, are now in police custody. Chris, let me ask you, there's a very specific close-up panel of this minor character police detective, Lieutenant Chris Keating.
Okay.
From New York's Special Weapons Task Force.
Yes.
Do you recognize him at all? Does he look familiar to you?
He looks familiar, but I can't say who he looks like.
That is Jack Kirby.
Oh, I was actually thinking he looked a bit like Patrick McNee. But now that you say it, yes, he looks a lot like Jack Kirby.
Yep. Giffen drawing a little.
He's also
Jack
the height of Jack Kirby.
Exactly. He takes the defenders to meet with Omar. They introduce themselves, and you remember Omar is one of Doctor Strange's oldest friends. They are disciples of Stephen Strange. That's what Omar thinks of the defenders as. And then he basically tells them the history of the what's it called, the Star of Capistan.
The Star of Capistan. Yeah, there you go. Well, and then he reveals that Doctor Strange is missing.
Right.
So, and the power of the Star of Capistan is released, etc., etc. Now, we cut back to Valkyrie and Red Guardian. They're having a conversation about what Red Guardian should do. And now we have, Brian, interestingly, I would say, other than Valkyrie and Nighthawk, the most important introduction of a new Defender in the whole series.
I agree. And the happy-go-lucky Hellcat, a.k.a. Patsy Walker. In fact, if you watch Jessica Jones or the Defender series on Netflix, you're familiar with Patsy Walker.
Who's a.k.a. Trish Walker in those Netflix series. Do you want to talk about Trish with Patsy Walker's history? Because I want to talk about my reasoning for why I think she's so important. But go
Absolutely.
ahead.
She's actually one of Marvel's oldest characters. Back when Marvel didn't just produce superhero books, back in the early Atlas days, and the Timely Days, even, I think she goes back to. They would do, teen romance books. They would do monster books. They do Western books. And she was a character from that era, repurposed in the late 60s and 70s as this superheroine, Hellcat.
And let me back up a moment too.
Okay.
So you have two things going here. You do have Patsy Walker, who was a child star and model in her own continuity, who was, as you say, repurposed. The character Greer Nelson, who is Tigra, was once a costumed character called the Cat.
Right.
Briefly. And once she became Tigra, she abandoned her costume. The costume that Hellcat wears is the same costume that Greer Nelson wore when she was the Cat. So Patsy is Hellcat. For me, it's funny because the costume is very simple. This panel, the introductory panel, is fantastic.
Right.
The costume's very simple. And I have to say, I think one of the things that I love the most about this character and why I always enjoyed her whenever is she was the happy-go-lucky Hellcat. The same reason I liked the bountiful blue-eyed beast when he was a member of the Avengers. It's that sense of joy that comes off of these characters, and you need it in these books, And so Hellcat, for a while, represents that element that will eventually change.
She, for new listeners, new readers to the Defenders, Hellcat will become as essential to this team as Nighthawk, Valkyrie, Hulk, Doctor Strange.
Correct.
And she will be around for the rest of the book, pretty much.
Right. Well, until the quote-unquote new Defenders, yeah.
Right. I got to tell you, though, as a kid, I did not care for the Hellcat.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found her to just be this one-note character. Always cracking jokes. Always, she's the party girl. And as a 11-year-old kid reading these, I already had Spider-Man to crack jokes. I didn't need it from two characters. Right. I never cared for her until
the six-fingered hand.
Yeah, when J.M. DeMatteis gets his hands on this character. Now,
all right, no spoilers.
I'm not going to spoil it. I mean, we are going to rave about his run on the book even more than we did Gerber's. And he did so many things. His work with Gargoyle alone should have won all the awards. But I think where he's shown in particular is his characterization of Hellcat. You take this rather one-note party girl character and give her depth and agency and dimension, and it's pretty amazing work.
Yeah.
But until then, Hellcat's not my favorite.
Well, so not your favorite. I love the character, and again, so I love the character because I think she injects much needed levity into the book, and once Gerber's gone, you're not getting it from other characters. So I think she was necessary in that regard, and I also think that the story you love her in wouldn't have been effective if she hadn't been what she is now.
I agree.
So I also want to just quickly say that the introductory panel and the panel immediately preceding it at the bottom of the previous page of Valkyrie, probably the best work Giffen and Jansen do in this span.
Agreed.
That panel of Valkyrie is phenomenal. It's just so great. Anyway, we learned that Hellcat had departed briefly from the Avengers, and she'd been taken off into space by Moondragon. Also, the Defenders, Google it. You'll see her again, but for now, we'll just say Moondragon, who also is the daughter of Drax the Destroyer for Guardians of the Galaxy fans.
Yep.
Has taken Hellcat off to space to teach her how to be a better superhero and master the powers of the mind, which they say, but Hellcat never really shows any of those powers. This whole thing is a setup for something I think is really cool, which is that they're discussing Hellcat's origins and history, and Red Guardian is still trying to figure out what to do with her life, and she looks out the window, and what does she see, Brian?
She sees the folks in the city have become zombies. It's the curse of the ruby, the curse of the Star of Capistan. Everybody's walking around, as Valkyrie exclaims, "Demons of the Norn, you speak the truth. All the streets' inhabitants are marching in thrall." And most shockingly, Wong, Doctor Strange's assistant, Wong, is among them.
Which I don't think we ever go back to, the fact that Wong is there. But but in any case, we then cut back to Omar Karindu telling Nighthawk, Hulk, and Luke Cage the history of the Star of Capistan. We reveal that it survived from the time of ancient Lemuria, and the jewel had all these sort of powers, and it merges with a person. It has no sense of good or evil in and of itself, supposedly. Anyway, it merged with an ordinary guy and basically burnt him out. So now, for the first time since 1933, it's merged with someone new, and that person is...
Dun, da, 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 Doctor Strange. Yes, Doctor Strange is, in fact, the Red Rajah.
Yes, the merger of the ruby or the gem or whatever, the Star of Capistan with Doctor Strange has created the Red Rajah. And then Hulk and Luke Cage and Nighthawk see the people getting, turned into basically zombies, including Omar Karindu.
Right.
They see a red glow in the distance. They go and they find that basically the Red Rajah is in the center of Central Park, and he's gathering all these people to him. And similar to previous villains we've seen in this book, he's basically saying he's going to force everybody to be nice by essentially mentally enslaving them.
Yeah, I mean, he and Nebulon would have a lot to talk about over coffee.
Exactly, he and Nebulon. And that leads, Brian, to the end of this issue, and I think a really important turn. Basically, the male defenders get their asses whooped.
That's right, and we have this wonderful closing panel with Valkyrie, Hellcat, and Red Guardian ready to kick ass.
Defender versus Defender. All right. We'll jump into issue 45 and get that taken care of, because then we need to talk briefly about what's coming in the next episode. The
That's
next
right.
2 episodes.
Special note to Joe Hill. I don't know if Joe listens to this or not. He ought to. He's friends with us both. But Defenders 45, Joe, you will note the bottom panel on the opening splash page. It says, dedicated to Neil, Getty, and Alex of Rush, the greatest band of all time. I'm making the devil horns right now.
I did see Rush in concert. I enjoyed it. They were not my favorite band, but I want to point something out here, just FYI for our listeners. This issue also plotted by Conway, written by Kraft and Slifer, drawn by Giffen and Jansen. However, legendary Marvel and DC editor Archie Goodwin takes the reins at this point.
Yes.
So I just want to point that out. Also, Brian, since you're not looking at the issue the same way I am, I want to point out to you that the full color ad on the inside cover is for the most exciting original motion picture event of all time, King Kong.
The 1976 King Kong?
The 1976 King Kong, with him standing on the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center in New York, of course, which don't exist anymore. But in any case,
it's unfortunate that I'm recording this in my kitchen today rather than the studio, because I have the lunchbox from that movie, the metal lunchbox. I still have it, and it has that iconic image on it.
All right, I insist you tweet a picture of that lunchbox later.
I will. And inside are all my top Star Wars cards from the first movie.
Excellent. I will be coming over to steal those. All right, so prepare for battle, my fellow females, for we must free the defenders. So yes, the ladies of the defenders go to attack the Red Rajah, and what does he do? He summons from the ground a giant stone golem version of Doctor Strange.
Right.
They still don't know that he is Doctor Strange.
Right. And they fight him. He he wants them to heed his mandates.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to mesmerize them.
It starts to work on Red Guardian.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Hellcat tackles her out of the way. So there you go. The fight ensues. And again, I love this because it's, at the time, what was the name of that all-women Marvel team that showed up from time to time? It was like Medusa and Sue Storm.
I remember. And Crystal, I believe.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they called themselves, though, because they never got their own book.
Yeah. Well, in any case, it's it's interesting to me because some of the women who are acting in the Marvel Cinematic Universe have proposed to Kevin Feige that they do essentially a movie version of that. All the female heroes from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in their own film.
I'd see that.
I would. Are you kidding me? I would.
Yeah, I'd watch the hell out of that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, basically, Red Rajah gets away, and Red Guardian and Hellcat and Valkyrie are recovering from the fight, and some civilians show up, and basically they fill in that the one lady says she watched her professor get taken over, and they're watching all these folks parade off to Central Park with the Red Rajah. The female defenders decide to go after him, and then we cut to the New Jersey Turnpike, where
Brian's favorite
Jack Norris.
That's right.
Is speeding along in a black custom Jaguar. There's another reason why I love Jack Norris. If you have to drive the New Jersey Turnpike, and I have to on occasion, the only way to do it is to speed. Jack discovers that he is being followed by another car. A car chase ensues. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, other than to say car chases are incredibly difficult to do in comic book format. Yes, comics and movies are both a visual medium, but comic book it's a singular image. It's not a moving image.
Right.
But Giffen does a masterful job of depicting this car chase. Jack's car wrecks. He jumps a fence and keeps fleeing his mysterious pursuers. And then we go back to Central Park, Chris.
Well, we go back to Central Park with Red Rajah essentially cowing and controlling the Hulk. We then return to the Sanctum Sanctorum, where Valkyrie and Hellcat are discussing why the Red Guardian seemed to have fallen under his spell, the Red Rajah spell, while they didn't. And Hellcat says, maybe it's her communist mentality, my ex-hubby Buzz used to say. And then we get a lecture from Valkyrie.
Yes.
Hellcat, please refrain from making absurd judgments based on nationality. An individual's social sympathies do not necessarily make her an easy subject for mind control, despite what your ex-husband used to say. In 2018, we call that throwing shade.
So yeah, they go on with their theory. Red Guardian proposes that the Red Rajah advocates collective consciousness, and perhaps this mystic persuasion evoked a strong subconscious sympathy in Red Guardian for this deceptively logical philosophy.
Right, because her government and culture emphasizes the common good over individualism.
Right.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Right. They then go check in the fourth female of the defenders who was missing from the fight. I am, of course, talking about Clea, who has proven herself time and time again in this book. She has been deep in a mystic trance, and she's awake, and she says her psychic search has yielded the answer. For the Red Rajah is, what we the readers already know, Doctor Strange.
Yeah. All right, so now that we've brought back to Clea and we're at 4 members of this all-female Defenders team in this moment, I will point out that I did look it up, and the all-female team I was referring to are the Lady Liberators.
That's it.
Who first appeared in Avengers 83 in December 1970, led by Valkyrie, no surprise, Although at the time she was the Enchantress in disguise as Valkyrie. And the original team, in addition to the Enchantress disguised as Valkyrie, were the Wasp, Black Widow, Scarlet Witch, and Medusa.
That's it.
They were resurrected much later in 2008. But yeah, so that's, I think, an interesting... Now, you're not going to call any team like that the Lady Liberators now.
No, but you could call them the Liberators.
You could.
You put Alex DeCampi or Kelly Sue DeConnick or Rachel Autumn Deering as a writer on that, and I will buy 2 copies every month.
Yep, exactly. Gail Simone,
yeah,
In any case, all right, now back to our entranced members, Hulk, Nighthawk, Luke Cage, are still entranced by the Red Rajah. And as I flip through many pages of ads, that's the one irritating thing about this. The female members of the Defenders, take to the streets again. In Valkyrie's case, she takes to the sky on the back of Aragorn, who's been curiously missing from this comic for a while.
Yes, it's almost like they also remembered, oh yeah, in addition to Red Guardian, Valkyrie has a winged horse.
And then basically, it's an interesting lineup. It's Hulk versus Hellcat.
Yep.
Luke Cage versus Valkyrie, and Nighthawk versus Red Guardian.
Right, and during that fight, Hulk gets to call Luke Cage by his nickname again. Fuzzy hair is right.
And what they do is they buy time for Clea to sneak up on Doctor Strange, or on the Red Rajah, I should say. And there is a psychic magical battle while the fisticuffs are going on elsewhere. And that's actually pretty entertaining as fisticuffs go, because it's team members fighting their fellow team members. But in the end, Clea is enough of a mistress of the mystic arts to free Doctor Strange from the control of the Star of Kapistan, which Doctor Strange immediately destroys.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, well, that was a pretty big deal to just be like, yeah, one panel. Yeah, we've destroyed that. That won't bother us again.
Yep, which takes us to the end of the issue. Again, some really neat experimentation by Giffen. The epilogue of the issue, the word epilogue is actually spelled out in a panel grid, which is very, very cool. We're back in the Sanctum Sanctorum, the full team. Nighthawk, Luke Cage, Hulk, Red Guardian, Valkyrie. We don't see Hellcat in the panel, but I'm assuming she's there, and Doctor Strange. And Doctor Strange tells them that though it grieves him to do so, he must leave the Defenders.
And then, of course, the tagline at the end promoting the next issue is "The End of the Defenders?" ? And we know, friends, true believers, that it is not the end of the Defenders. Next episode, we will be discussing one of my favorite stories from this early Defenders run. Even though I haven't reread the issues yet, I fear that I'm going to find that they're not as good as I remember them. But it's a story featuring Scorpio and the Zodiac.
That's right.
And I'm really excited to discuss this arc, Brian, because
why?
Because one of my all-time favorite characters, and we will discuss my devotion to this character, one of the most ill-used characters in the history of Marvel, is Moon Knight.
Moon Knight.
And we see Moon Knight throughout this 5-issue arc. I was a huge fan of Moon Knight, loved the character.
I was too.
But he hasn't been done really to my satisfaction, probably, since the end of Doug Moench's original run.
I loved Doug Moench's run. That's the first time I actually sought out a comic book store, was when that run ended on the newsstand. You could only buy it in the comic book store. And I didn't care for anything after that. However, I really enjoyed Warren Ellis's take on the character. I don't know if you read the 6-issue run that he had.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, I liked, as a creator, I liked watching him create with that character.
I thought it was interesting. It was certainly better and more interesting than a lot of the other stuff that's. But I'm a purist when it comes to that character. When I took a screenwriting course in college, my screenplay was actually a Moon Knight film.
No kidding.
Which we only had to write Act 1 for the class, but I wrote I wrote Act 1 of film adaptation of Moon Knight.
Well, I enjoy the Scorpio saga too, and I am a big Moon Knight fan. But I enjoy the Scorpio saga for another reason, because once again, Jack Norris is going to come to the forefront in a very big way.
Brian, you need to write a Jack Norris series.
I would. I don't
Absolutely.
think Marvel. I don't know that Tom Brevoort is actually going to let me ever write anything for Marvel ever again. But
join the club.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, folks, just a couple reminders here. If you enjoyed our show, you may also enjoy Three Guys with Beards. That's a podcast that Chris co-hosts every week with authors James Moore and Jonathan Mayberry. You might also enjoy The Horror Show with Brian Keene, as you might guess by the title. That's hosted by myself, along with author Mary San Giovanni, veteran video game animator Dave Thomas, and filmmaker Mike Lombardo. Both of those are available everywhere that you listen to Defenders Dialogue. And, of course, you can listen to Defenders Dialogue on iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and all other platforms via our network, the Project Entertainment Network. Special shout-out, as always, to our engineer, Tommy Clark. Please, if you have a moment, check out his podcast, The Necrocasticon. It is always entertaining. Again, available wherever you listen to Defenders Dialogue. Chris, do you have anything to send us home with?
Brian, all I can say is Excelsior, true believers.
All right, we will see you next week, folks. Hi, this is Brian Keene. I'm an international best-selling, award-winning horror novelist.
No comment!
I know where the bodies are buried, and now I'm telling you their location every week on The Horror Show.
Brian, no comment, don't you understand?
We discuss the latest news in horror novels, movies, comics, and games, and interview the biggest names in the business.
This interview is over. No comment!
Thursday nights at 7 p.m. only on Project Entertainment Network.
Three Guys with Beards.
The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink stains, Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method Monster Attack.
Necrocastical.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club podcast.
Piss on.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.